What's up, y'all? It's Peter Agostin. Welcome to my weekly podcast, The House List. We got a great show for you today. As they all are. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you. I appreciate it. I record these here in New York City. It's cold in New York City right now. And I met up with a great journalist from LA who was in town very briefly. Jeff Weiss is our guest today. And let's see, I guess people would know him for a few different reasons. If you're like a podcast fan, a hip-hop head, you know, he had a very well-known and well-programmed LA-based podcast with his co-host, No Can Do, called Shots Fired. It's still out there. You can still find it. They haven't done an episode in a minute, but I think a lot of people came to know him through that, and then his own blog, Passion of the Weiss, and then as a reoccurring columnist and contributor to the LA Weekly, amongst many other publications. So, you know, we're like sort of waist deep in the midst of a boycott of the LA Weekly, immediately following the announcement of its sale by Voice Media to a group called Seminole Media. So Jeff Weiss is, if you will, leading the crusade. Now, you can follow a lot of what's going on through his Twitter page. So I recommend, if you're totally unfamiliar with it, what's going on, and I guess you'd have to be living in LA or really like in music journalism or in that world or that game a little bit to get it, and not even music journalism really, but you know, sort of be a part of that world to really understand what's going on. So I would advise going to Jeff's Twitter and sort of running down. It's pretty amazing. So he's at Passion Weiss, Weiss. And so I was fascinated about this whole thing because I've been watching it, basically the play-by-play, and I really wanted to talk to him about it, get his take on this. Basically, the very well-respected weekly, no different than the Village Voice, which was owned by the same company, which unceremoniously ended its print run not long ago here in New York, really a matter of weeks ago. But with the LA Weekly, they basically sold it, went in on Thanksgiving when everyone was away, the new owners, supposedly, and pretty much fired everybody there, you know, sans a couple people, and left a lot of people high and dry. And listen, I've been there. I've worked enough in the music business to have seen companies just straight fold. You know, I ran a record label for many years, and I had a distribution deal here in New York City with, you know, a distribution company that it doesn't matter what they're called at this point in time because it's so dead. It's like it's irrelevant. But they filed for, you know, Chapter 11. Bankruptcy, and they probably housed maybe 30 different labels, and I was owed, I don't know, maybe like $35,000 or something. I had never gotten a royalty check. I had always given my artists big advances, so I was finally going to be in the black, if you will. And instead of actually getting paid for anything, I got a letter that said, oh yeah, we're going bankrupt, so you're not going to get anything at all. In fact, you can buy your records back from us. So I was shell-shocked. In fact, that is the reason why I started working at Re-Up magazine here in New York, which also has folded. But running a magazine is very tricky. And anyway, so I could identify very deeply with what Jeff is going through. And I admire the guy a lot, you know, and for what he's doing right now, because he's actually just like speaking up and instead of rolling over, you know. And it's pretty indicative of what's happening in this country on a whole. So I think if you listen to this conversation that I'm about to get into with Jeff, you'll get that, you'll have that context, and you'll see, because there's a much bigger picture. Although when you focus in on specifically what's going on with the LA Weekly, and where do you go from there if you're a writer? And this can happen anywhere. And in fact, when it happened to the Voice, as far as I could see, I didn't see anyone that was affiliated with the paper say anything. So to see Jeff kind of, put his ass on the line, I guess, if you will, and risk some shit just to kind of speak up, I found that to be admirable. So I wanted to talk to him about it. So we go into that, and we talk, it's great. I thought it was an awesome conversation. So with that, let's just hop into this. Again, my name is Peter Agostin. This is the Houseless Podcast. I do this on a weekly basis. Hopefully, before the year is totally up, I might have a couple special treats, but we're just making this work. If you're interested in what I'm doing, then please subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on SoundCloud. It's at the Houseless Podcast on SoundCloud. I'm at Twitter at HouselessPod. You can also find it on Stitcher, Google Play, et al. So support it and let people know about it. Especially this is an episode for my fellow music journalists and writers. I went to college and got a degree in journalism, and I talk about it a little bit in this conversation. And so I have a great affinity for people in that world, especially if they're working at a place, at a paper, or at a magazine or whatever. So, and hopefully I'll be able to do a few more of these kind of conversations with writers coming up. It's something I've been wanting to do, and I tried to do since I started the podcast a year and a half ago. This is episode 65, by the way. So, yeah. Also, every episode is edited and engineered by CJ Stewart. If anyone wants to advertise or underwrite this podcast, the Houseless Podcast, just get in touch with me, Peter Agostin, and we can set it all up. I can assure you, a lot of people will hear it all over the world. I'd be looking at the numbers, I know. So, with that being said, thank you again, and let's get into this very unique and interesting conversation with Jeff Weiss, only here on the Houseless. Check it out, y'all. In the moment, it's in the heat of it right now, and I think for me personally too, I engage with this on such a deep level too, just because I started really as a writer. I got a degree in journalism, and
one of us.
But hey, yeah. But the thing is, the guys I went to school with and the teachers I had. This was at Humboldt State in Arcata, California.
That's cool. I spent a night in a car there once.
That's a good way to do it. Classic.
Yeah, that's what we figured. We were like, I think that's the place to spend. We're on a road trip. Me and my friend after we graduated. We thought it made sense. So we're like, yeah, Arcata, that'll be chill. Everyone sleeps in their car probably. Yeah. It turned out, it was definitely like that. It turned out they smoke a lot of weed there.
They definitely
I didn't realize that.
Yes, absolutely.
I did. But.
Well, the professors at the school and a lot of my classmates, I guess, if you will, they're all California newspaper people.
Oh, cool.
So, and a lot of them, the teachers at least, kind of came up in the 60s. And so there was a certain very kind of anti-establishment, super kind of I guess very liberal, but also just on top of reporting and very ingrained in that world. So to see what's happening with the LA Weekly right now, when it's so fresh off the heels of basically what happened to the Village Voice too.
Yeah, and LAist and Gothamist is pretty tragic. Houston Press. I think a lot of people leave out the Houston Press too.
I didn't even know about that.
Houston Press. It's all the Voice Media Group, and they shut down the Houston Press's public edition. They shut down the Village Voice. Well, they'd sold the Village Voice before that. The whole thing it's grotesque, because these corporations obviously you're running something with a civic interest.
Yeah.
In the basically the mission statement is to serve your community, and that was the one thing that the Voice Media Group. It's been interesting. I've seen a 2007 Nation article get passed around about how all these alt weeklies had fallen off from their glory days in the 90s, which probably is true because what hasn't fallen off from its glory days in the 90s?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the same as people that are writing think pieces. Like, rap isn't as good as the 90s. And you're like, okay, you're right. I'm sorry, like, Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, and Tribe Called Quest aren't releasing albums in the same week.
Right.
I'm really sorry. You know what I mean? Like, that was lightning. But the one good thing I will give the Voice Media Group, not many things I will say positive about them, they introduced a hyperlocal coverage, which had always been...
Okay.
The LA Weekly had been very national in its scope, including local coverage. I mean, when you're having a 200-page paper, you can kind of do both, right?
Yeah.
When you're running now the paper was down to 45, 50 pages.
Wow. So, but when you started, what was
It was about
that
100 something.
Wow.
I mean, it was '07. I started in '07 right when they bought it. So I did not. I'd grown up reading it, so I understood. Like, I had a lot of respect for the writers before that. I mean, sometimes it was a little like very much like granola, like knee-jerk reactionary lefty, which I honestly at the time I thought seemed a little reductive and silly. Mm-hmm. And now that I've had more experience in my life and probably the country's descended more into a dungeon abyss.
Right.
Now it seems to make a lot more sense, and now I've gotten I think further left as everything has, I just as corporate greed has only increases. I feel like we're on a timeline, like all these things that people have been talking about, really start in like the 50s and 60s.
Absolutely.
At least, and it's just we're just so much further along the timeline. It becomes so clear that you're like, oh my god, like basically this country is being run by crooks and thieves, which it probably always was. But like,
well, when you start to see these institutions kind of falling by the wayside, it starts to open it up a little bit more too.
Yeah, and there were progressive movements throughout history, like Robert Lafayette leading the progressive movement in the 20s. Like Theodore Roosevelt, like was a person. He's good and bad side, but like the notion of trust busting is important, and that we've are breaking up monopolies and stuff like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. Corporate control is and consolidation in the last 20 years is insidious, and it affects radio, it affects movies, it affects... Yeah, why are there no comedies? Do you notice that? Like, there are no funny movies ever? Like, there's not been a funny movie in a decade, probably since Superbad. I mean, there have been funny movies. You know what I mean? But, like, it's only...
if it's, like, on a major scale, it's few and far between.
Well, there's no, like, $30, $40 million comedy, which, like, like, and you grew up in the 80s, and you're like, all those Bill Murray movies, or whatever, which are, like, to me, like, a movie like Fletch, like, the movie's not getting made today.
Yeah.
And speaking of investigative journalists, it's like the first thing. I'm feeling very, I want to be like Fletch. And that's horrible. And it's because they want to make movies that'll sell over the world, because corporations only care about billions of dollars. They don't care about millions of dollars. I mean, they care about every penny, but like that is other thing. They care about every penny, but they'd rather make like a comic book movie that can make tens or hundreds of millions in China.
Sure, and an American comedy doesn't really translate. Right?
No, it doesn't translate.
Right.
It might not even translate to like France or England.
Sure,
let alone like a country, completely with a different cultural system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And language. I mean, like, yeah, good luck translating English. Like, I mean, and because to me, I mean, some like comedies about nuance, and that's the other thing. To pivot back. Hyperlocal journalism is all about nuance. Mm-hmm. It's all about, like, you've worked with Dame Funk for a long time, right? So, to know where Dame Funk comes from, you have to know what LA was like in the 80s.
Yeah.
You have to know about, like, Egyptian Lover and the sports arena and, like, how big Prince was in the 80s and how, like, Prince came to the Rose Bowl and opened for the Stones and got booed and, like, how much that affected the community. Just little things. You have to know about, like, Pasadena, because the Pasadena of Dame Funk is not the Pasadena of the Rose Bowl, old money, like
or
white,
like David Lee Roth, or
completely different. Like, and I know I've seen where Dame grew up because he took me there, and it's like right across the street from the projects. It's like that was a bloodhood. Like, you have to know that. Like, and Pasadena is going to have like a different like cadence and a different slang and a different like sets than South Central will. It is different.
For sure. Yeah.
And so like, fuck you to come in and think you can do that, because that and like I've been keep on saying about like the notion of institutional knowledge, and it's not even institutional knowledge. It's like the knowledge of like, it's not necessarily the knowledge of the streets, because I didn't grow up like, I'm not like a street person. Obviously, I don't think hopefully no one would ever take that. But
are you an LA native though?
I'm from LA.
Oh, okay,
but like,
so you have the context already somewhat. It's already somewhat instinctual in you because you at least grew up in the city.
It's instinctive, and it's from listening and reporting and like meeting people and going to college in LA and like, I went to college at Oxnella College.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which was the most ever. I don't know if it still is, but at the time was the most ever like liberal arts small college in America.
Right.
And I thought that was wonderful because I was meeting.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Oxy. A great radio station too.
Yeah. No, I went there to play baseball, which is because
way.
I got recruited to play baseball and basketball there, and it was the only school that recruited me for both. And I for a minute I was told with playing both baseball and basketball in college, but I thought that. And they gave me like some money, and it was just, I'd never been to private school in my life, and I thought it was always I really wanted to go to a private school because I always thought that like I really wanted a better education. I hated like my high school. I hated math. I hated science. All that shit. I just idiot.
Like a true writer right there.
I just did not enjoy it. I got thrown out of class. I talked too much, which it's good for podcasting, but it's not good for it's not good for Mr. Zade's prop stat class.
But it's also good for, in a way, music journalism, because that descriptive, that nuance, and that context, it paints a picture. I mean, that's why I love certain music writers so much, because there's a way to. When you're explaining songs and stuff, I mean, there's more to it than just that.
It doesn't come from the ether. I mean, It does. Like, music is magic, like most art is, but at the same time, like, it's especially rap music.
Right.
And, like, that's the other thing. It's like, that's what was so funny to me, was, like, buying the paper and not talking to anybody. Because it's like, good luck. Not to be that guy, but like, I know every single rap writer in LA. There's only 7 of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's not that many of us.
Sure.
Like, because you can't know. Like, I mean, you can know that much, but it takes years to do that. And it's like all of us would never it's. And it was like, you don't necessarily have to be. My friend Rebecca Haithcote is from Tennessee and is an amazing music writer. And I think her Southern background gives her a certain depth. And even in LA, there's such a connection to the South.
Absolutely.
Somebody like a Snoop Dogg, I'm pretty sure he was his parents were from Mississippi, and then there's Long Beach. Obviously, it's a port, port and factories there. So a lot of black people in the 30s to 50s all moved here in search of jobs. So Long Beach in particular has a particularly more of a Baptist sound, because a lot of Baptist churches there, and has more of a soulful, which is also why the Chronic is that way.
Right.
Because Nate Dogg grew up singing in the Baptist church, and Snoop Dogg has that kind of second generation Southern twang to him.
Yeah.
And you'd have to know that, and these are things I think that ideally in All Weekly, you would. I wish they'd hired more locals. That was always kind of my thing. But they did.
So what was the ratio? Do you know
of locals?
There was satellite contributors. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was to be honest, and I thought the staff was great. I don't know if any of the staff members were from Los Angeles, which was always. But this is all, and that's not their fault. Like you're born where you're born.
Job is a job.
You're born where you're born, and they were great, and that's all that matters. And they cared, and they did an amazing job of becoming a part of this, the city. But a
lot of people come to LA.
Yeah,
they descend upon.
It's fine.
LA.
That's a valuable perspective in its own right, because the transplant perspective is half the LA story, probably.
Right.
The city is a transplant city in a lot of ways,
for sure.
But I will say that the blame should be, if there was some woman was complaining about it. There weren't enough people that kind of were from LA and people of color, and that was a very valid critique, I think. But the hiring was from the Voice media, and the Voice media did not care about anything, and they sold it somehow to people. They only cared about profits. One person from Voice Media Group told my colleague that if she wanted to work for the company, she needed to have a migrant worker mentality.
Wow.
Which was just one of the most offensive and tone deaf, racist.
That?
You know what I mean? Yeah. Why say that? But these are the kind of people we're dealing with, and I'm talking corporate control of the media, and going back to that, and. She said, and they didn't make a point of hiring people from LA. They didn't make a point of hiring really people of color, and that's a huge stain on their record. Which there are many stains in their record. I would say arguably the biggest is selling to these people.
Right. So for people that might be listening that don't have that kind of reference point, as far as who own, a lot of people will pick up a weekly, and obviously it's very much a dying industry in so many ways. But they'll pick up a weekly and not really realize that it's not owned by a local or owned by.
You think it would be owned by just some local millionaire,
right? Right.
But it's not. So basically, it was founded by some. Most of the weeklies came out of the 50s. Right. The Village Voice is really the first one. Comes out of New York. Norman Mailer is a part of it. It's a real arts community thing. It has a story tradition that a lot of us know about. LA Weekly comes in 1978. I believe the man's name was Jay Levin, and he was a very liberal guy who wanted, competitor to the Times. They had, I think the Herald Examiner was still going pretty strong in LA. So this is a town where, that's the thing, the other thing I can't even stress is we're talking. I mean, the cities have like 4 major metropolitan newspapers, plus an all weekly, plus sometimes 2. I mean, when I started writing for LA Weekly, I'm pretty sure there were 3 all weeklies in the city, including the weekly.
What? So is that factoring, like, is that LA Record would be considered that?
I'm not even including LA Record. LA Record, I think, also was going, but they had the Los Angeles, I think it was called the Los Angeles Alternative, and then they had Los Angeles City Beat.
Oh, yeah, City Beat, right.
And that was, I never wrote for either of those. I always wanted to write for the weekly, right. And when I got, but I'm rambling, but, so basically the weekly is this thing, it goes for a long time, it gets bought in 2007, ultimately by a group originally called New Times.
Yeah.
They became, they're from Phoenix.
Yeah. No, I know. I wrote for the Miami New Times.
Okay.
In like 2005 or 4 or something like that.
So, yeah, I mean, they were conservative, but they were more apolitical.
Right.
I think. And so basically they got bought, and the tone did shift. And like LA Weekly did become less staunchly liberal. But at the same time, like, it became hyper local. So like, I don't think anyone needs like, it's not necessarily about like it does need to embody progressive values. That is a very important component of it. But it also needs to like embody the local thing. So I was like, okay, fine. If they're picking the local element of it, I'm not going to be mad because I am from LA and that is important. And like so basically it gets bought. All of a sudden everything goes. It becomes the Village Voice Media Group 2012. Like they make all their money off something called Backpages.com, which is basically like an online brothel, more or less.
Oh, okay.
And then there was protests. It's funny, like, I won't get into the person, but one of the people that stayed there was like, oh, you never had a problem writing for New Times when they were running Backpages.com. I'm like, what are you talking about? They literally had protests, and one of the guys that was running the company, his name is Michael Lacey, he just was like, fine, I'll just take the brothel. I'll just take the digital brothel, and I'll divest myself from the company, and he gave it to 3 other owners.
Yeah, because for him, it's ultimately just about making money.
It's just about money. Right. Like Backpages.com is basically like took, I think, all the adult ads from Craigslist, or I don't know.
Right.
But, yes, we did that.
Weird.
And I was like, yeah, no, there was what are you talking about? There was a controversy. I mean, at the time, personally, I was just like, keep the paper alive. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not in favor of like, God knows what was on there. But like, I mean, if the paper was alive, like, the paper was alive. And like, I wasn't about to like, but I think it was a good thing. Like, I do think it was a good thing that they did. I mean, an alternative weekly, should not be running a digital brothel to survive. That is a bad thing. Like, I want to be clear about that. But and now here we are. So then, about at the top of the year, they decided to put the paper up for sale.
Voice Group.
The original asking price is like $5 million, which is a lot of money for a newspaper. Mm-hmm. It was profitable. They sold in the thing. Everything about this sale has been a fucking shit show. Just a catalog of blunders and idiocy. They never talked to any of the editorial staff. I won't even divulge the final sale price, but let's just say that like I know people that live in more expensive condos.
Okay.
Like, and definitely a lot of people in more expensive houses.
Right.
And it was pitiful. Like, how are you going to do that? And they sold it to a company that was formed for the purposes of the sale called Seminole Media Group.
Yeah, so that I've been trying to understand what that is too. Yeah. So they're formed for the sale. So obviously someone's pulling investors from somewhere to buy it, but for what particular reason would a new entity need to be established to make this purchase? Like,
well, I think they created, it's a bunch of investors came together to create it. But basically, the guy who put together the deal, from what I'm told, it's all of this is from sources. So and like, because unlike them, I have a value for journalism and the truth. You can't, nothing is 100% ever. But it was bought for the purchase of sale. The man that took over and did he was the public fronting face of the group. His name was Brian Kaye, and. So from the get-go, Brian Kaye has pretty much just been abusing the public trust and just lying without any kind of compunction or gag reflex.
What's his background? Is he an owner does he own any other larger publications, or do you know anything about him?
He was a man who allegedly went to USC, worked for a place called the Claremont Institute. In the Claremont, I'm going to paraphrase, but the Claremont Institute's civic stated goal, and he was an executive officer there. The stated goal was to infiltrate progressivism in all its ways and basically take it down. So, I don't know, like no red flags. And he was like, oh, it was 10 years ago. I didn't, I'm different now. But number one, like, if you want to go through, like, that's where Andrew Breitbart comes from.
Right.
That's where Chuck Johnson, who was a writer that, did a lot of clickbait and or not clickbait. He did horror. I don't know the logistics of it, but I remember it was bad. He got thrown off Twitter for being just too bad.
Right.
The Claremont Institute is one of the preeminent, and when I mean preeminent, I'm using air quotes, conservative think tanks in Southern California, which you can Google it.
So do you think that with this, now this is as an outsider, because living in New York, I only have so much of a reference to the LA Weekly.
Yeah.
But do you think and this is just my own theoretical question, is the purchase basically to ultimately reform it into more of like the way they would change a terrestrial radio station format wise? Would it be something? Do you project something like that? Or?
I'll get into it. So basically,
Okay.
like it's so this man does this. His last job ends up being running the opinion and editorial pages for the Southern California News Group.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar with the Southern California News Group, which I assume most of your listeners aren't, it's basically a consortium of newspapers in Southern California, almost exclusively local papers. It's the Daily News is a Valley newspaper. There's the Pasadena Star News in Pasadena. There's the Daily Breeze that covers Torrance, like Manhattan Beach, the South Bay, the San Bernardino Sun, the Whittier paper. It's just a whole, like every local newspaper outside of the LA Times. And this man was running basically right-wing op-eds on the page. And, he'd occasionally have an Ermin Shermerwinski to chime in and be like, here's a liberal perspective, but...
Would they get published in all of those papers?
And they would get published in all of them.
Holy
they're
shit.
almost the same. So it was a way to, like, kind of... And, like, you think about it, okay, well, Fox News is getting, 3-4 million people? I don't know what the circulation was, but it had to be in the millions. And it's, like, a bunch of... It's mostly an older...
Sure.
An old...
Who picks those
papers up? Mostly an older audience. Like,
Right.
mostly people in their 60s, 70s, 50s.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're picking up the paper and be like, wow, I guess, things have really changed. These papers that used to be liberal, I'm sure a lot of them... I mean, the Daily News was always more conservative.
Right.
But I guarantee a lot of these papers tended to have at least a more moderate to left bent. And all of a sudden now, and the Orange County Register was the main one that he was running to, which is traditionally the most conservative paper in California.
Yeah.
Orange County obviously being the hotbed of Republicanism in California,
Yeah.
although it's definitely changed in the last 20
Yeah.
years.
The OC Weekly, though, that's owned by the Voice Group, right?
It was. They just sold it a year or two ago.
Interesting.
And,
to someone completely different?
Uh-huh.
Interesting. Okay.
And they've had their own problems, but I think
Right.
they've been doing a great job in spite of it.
Okay.
They've been doing really they're killing it despite limited resources, and they lost their editor, Gustavo Arellano,
Oh,
who was
right.
great.
Yeah.
So Kaye does this. He puts together this deal. They buy the paper with just all these right-wing donors. You go through the list of the people that these men have donated to. It's like it's a horror show. It's like Pete Wilson, George W. Bush, Mitch McConnell. 25 grand to the Victory for Trump committee.
Oh my god.
And you think about that, and it's like, yeah, that does matter. Everything matters in 2017. Like, it has to matter. Like, I am done with it. I think everybody's done with it. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, I was just like, fuck it. This is not fucking happening in LA. No more. I'm done. Like, I am done. I am not watching this happen to the paper that I've written for 10 years. I'm not watching my archives and someone like Jonathan Gold or my colleagues like April Wolf, Gwyneth Stewart, Marshall Hoop, all these
who's another contemporary in hip hop? There's Ben Westhoff. That's another guy, right?
Yeah, Ben Westhoff is a buddy of mine who was the former music editor. I mean, Oliver Wang wrote a bunch of great stuff there. And it just goes on and on. There's that legendary NWA Jonathan Gold cover story he had. I had some great cover stories, I think, in my own, not to be a bragger.
No, I want to talk about those because I know you did at least one Dame. You did Dame once, right?
I did Dame features. I didn't get to do the Dame cover, which
there was the 7 Days of Funk cover.
That was a heartbreaking because I ended up having to write his bio, and then I had to recuse myself from it. And it was like I was doing it. I was just like, it's the saddest day of my life that I couldn't do a Dame cover.
I will say this, and I know I get pretty tangential with these conversations too. But as far as having worked with Dame as closely as I have, and for as long as I have, and I know how sensitive he is about reporting about his music and writing, and as are many artists.
But Dame is a genius.
Yeah,
but you
have. Yes, I agree with you for sure. But you've done a really great job as far as reporting on the arc of his career as it's changed, because it has changed a lot since To Each His Own and up till now. And there's a good. I wish I had a great a comparison off the top as far as a rock critic, relationship with another artist reporting over the course of their career and stuff. But you've captured it in a really good way where he's open with you, he's giving. He's not going to give you canned answers or be annoyed to commit to an interview and stuff like that. So I commend you at that.
Thank you. I mean, I've always tried to I usually go down and when I do an interview and I'm just like, look, I don't have any questions. They've all been asked. There are no questions in an interview. Mm-hmm. That's the dirty secret of journalism. It's like just talk to somebody. Right. Just have a conversation. It should be like this. Like if they say it, great. Like sometimes, I don't like the gotcha game. I think most artists are smart enough to know when you're setting a trap for them. And I'd rather the artist be like, I'd rather the artist tell me something off the record and I can use it in the background and I can use it to inform my story than clam up and give me some contrived answer that I'm not looking to. There are a lot of writers that are looking for that quote that will go viral. Like I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Like if my article doesn't go, if my article goes viral, hopefully it's on the quality of the writing and the quality of the artist and the ideas that they contain. I never wanted to be a writer that was because to be honest with you, I mean I never saw myself. I still don't see myself as a music journalist. I don't see myself really as a journalist. I see myself as a writer. First and foremost, that's all I would consider myself. Yes, I do journalism, of course. I take journalism incredibly serious. I love rap. It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Yeah. But I'm working on a book right now. I covered the Lakers for LA Weekly for 3 years.
Nice. You are on some Fletch shit then.
Yeah, I was definitely it was funny. Me long hair, bearded, showing up to all the games and it's super square at the Laker games. I really liked the PR people. They were amazing. The other writers. A couple of them were cool. J.A. Donde was tight. Uh-huh. He was a cool dude. But a lot of the writers were just who is this clown? Right. Walking in, they're all in suits, and I'm showing up in some ridiculous houndstooth coat. Something ridiculous. But yeah, no. I mean, to kind of I guess to kind of take it back. So basically, they buy this paper. They don't tell anyone about any of their plans. Well, then no, I should take it back. They tell one person, the interim editor. I don't want to dignify him by name. Who becomes he's the one writer they keep. They talk about his plans with him. Kaye had been on a panel with him 5 years before. So he's the only one that knows anything about it. If you read an interview with the rap that he gave, he basically admits as much that he didn't say that he expected everyone to get fired, but he says, I personally did not expect to get fired. So at best, it's very murky. Right. Everyone gets fired with no warning. No one knows anything of the new owners except for one person, who's the only person that doesn't get fired, who's the only person been in contact with them. He's a staff writer, and he's a staff writer. He's not an editor. Right. I don't know how familiar you are with the workings of journalism, but a staff writer is pretty far down on the totem pole. That's that.
Of course.
You know what I mean? It goes the manager, it goes the editor, the managing editor, probably the arts and culture. There's a film editor.
Yeah, food.
There was a food editor. There's a music editor. Right. Wasn't a sports person there, Which again, the other thing the Village Voice never did. How are you going to cover LA or the LA Weekly never did? How are you going to cover LA and not really have sports? I mean, I did it for a few years, but you should. I mean, that people love sports. Sports is, and it's ingrained in the fabric of LA.
Big time.
How are you going to not be a Lakers fan if you're from, or a Clippers fan at least, or something, or a Dodgers fan, or
Sure, you keep going. I mean, yeah,
totally. I mean, obviously, there's a heavy Latino population that loves soccer. You have the Galaxy. It's
And a lot of great college teams too.
Totally, totally. I mean, you could have done it on the cheap because people would love to cover that stuff.
Right.
I'm not even saying not to get but they. I mean, I was running about the Lakers for it might as well have been for free. Right. I was just doing it because I wanted to get a locker room pass. And I wanted to go in and I will say that saying I was from the LA Weekly counted for something. The old Lakers publicist was like, well, what do you want? Let me take you into the facility. Do you want to meet Jeannie Buss? The first time I met him.
Nice.
And and there I am. I'm a kid that grew up in LA and I'm in Jeannie Buss's office and she's showing me this painting of 7 Lakers and she goes, can you name all 7? So I'm fuck. It's the litmus test and I name all 7. I get to Devin George and I'm like, wow. Devin George? And she's very good. She's do you know why those are the 7? I'm because those were the Lakers and those were the Lakers in the first 3 championship teams. She's very good. And it was you passed the test.
Good job.
And that's what LA is I think is about. And I'm sure it's for that almost any city. It's if you go to Dallas, Texas, if you don't know the words to Not a Stain on Me by Big Tug, something like that, or there's certain things where it's you have to know, you're not part of the city. It's New York. It's good luck being here if Shook Ones Part 2 comes on and you don't know the words. You know what I mean? It's just certain things that are the lingo, the feel, the biorhythms, they're just like embedded in you. And like, I feel like LA is like that with me. I'm like, I grew up hating it in a lot of ways because it did conform to the cliche a little bit for most of my youth. And then I got older and I got to see things like a guy like Dame come out of nowhere, and you start connecting the dots. You see like the Low End Theory thing was like a very powerful thing for a long time.
Yes.
And that was, a formative experience in me. And like, I want to stress, like, the Low End Theory guys, with the exception of the Gaslamp Killer, were all from LA.
Right.
And
I guess being from San Diego.
And from San Diego. And D Styles, I guess, is from the Bay, I think, originally.
Right.
But Edit was, I think, from here originally, or close to here.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
One of the, I think, I'm not sure. But it would, most of the artists, No Such Thing is from here.
Right.
Flying Lotus is from here. Teebs was from Chino, like there's all like they're all from like the greater.
You can tell that how LA you are is that you're in New York City and you're still saying here for them, which is great. I love that.
Totally, yeah. I mean, like I haven't even left my hotel room. I've just been like chilling. I'm like, whatever. It's cool. I'm like, it's good. Yeah, and I haven't because it's so cold. I'm like,
it's brutal outside.
I'm like, what is this? 25 degrees? Are you kidding? I'm staying in my fucking room.
Right. So how do people, the staff and the writers and everyone, how do they even know of this mass firing?
These cowards don't tell anyone, and then like they sneak in over Thanksgiving break to check out The Office. No, they've never been in once. They didn't meet anyone to do an exit interview. So they get an email, I guess 2 weeks ago, 2 days before. So this is probably December 1st-ish about.
Wow. Yes.
Top of December.
Right
after Thanksgiving. They get an email, the publisher gets an email basically being like, everyone's gone. Fire everyone except one person. So the publisher gets fired, half the ad team gets fired. So then the publisher has to like one by one like slowly guillotine people himself because these people were too cowardly to do it.
Right.
Then
after getting fired themselves.
So then the editor has, and they're like, they told the editor like, you don't even have to go in, like just send him an email. And she like, she's an impressive. The editor's a very impressive, qualified, experienced journalist.
I would certainly think so.
Yeah,
she
was the editor of the Chicago Reader. She was the editor of Creative Loafing in Atlanta.
Wow.
She wrote the book on BMF. It's like, it's so, and that's the other thing that's like so, like, the notion that people like didn't just spend a decade and a half of their life being the best at what they do to get to this point.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I wanted that column at the LA Weekly my whole life.
Right.
I always wanted a column. Like, I always wanted a music column. And I remember like, and I would there were people before me, and I remember reading the weekly, and like, just a young kid just hating. Just hating, just being like, fuck that shit, I need that, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna be good. You know what I mean? Like, I know what I'm doing, like, I can do it. And then finally I met, shout out Ben Westhoff, he gave me the chance 5-6 years ago.
Dope.
And, and and like, it goes, so like, a little thing I said this in my original like rant about it, but it's like, I was doing that for the love. Like, I was getting paid.
Well, obviously you can't be getting paid that much.
I was getting paid, like, there was no print place that was paying me that little. There was no online place I would have taken that little money for.
Right.
I mean, I was definitely taking the big hometown discount.
Right.
And when you factor in that I was traveling to do a weekly, I was reporting it usually at someone's house, which is travel time in LA isn't, it's like New York, it's brutal.
And it's obviously mostly on your own dime.
I never got expense for gas, not one time. I asked for it. I was like, I would love to get expense for gas. Never did. No, they never offered anyone to transcribe an interview for me.
Wow.
It was like I was doing it all myself.
That's surprising.
Yeah, and that's all Voice Media Group. And because they were so tight-fisted and greedy. And I think my editors, of course, my editors were totally accommodating and cool, but it was just like, come on, like, I'm doing these interviews. Sometimes you drive to like South Central. Gas is not cheap.
No.
Go to and from. And then so I do that. I get the interview transcribed, and then I'd have to write it. And then that's every single week, 52 weeks a year. I mean, I would consistent, and I would very rarely take anything off. And
that's some true dedication, though.
Yeah, and not to like, because this really isn't about me, but like, you have no idea how many times I would like. It would be like once a month. I would be like, I'm quitting. This is dumb. I'm losing money.
Right.
Like, you're losing money. You could write something else and make triple this or at least double this. What are you doing? And then it would just be like, then I would do an interview the next week, and it would be like some young person who'd never done an interview, or it'd be like I'd go to like jail to interview. Like this year alone, like I went to jail to like interview Draco. Who was like a rising star. I went to county, and like, you couldn't take notes, so I had to remember everything. And just, and just seeing, looking in his eyes, and like, this is the young face of LA. He's about to be the biggest rap star. And it's just like, just in jail in the jumpsuit, just the bright orange jumpsuit, and you're just talking. You know what I mean? It's like, that's powerful. Interviewing O3 Greedo, who's about, like, he's now in jail, unfortunately, like, free Greedo. And, So, and like, I mean, they're both like, I think, geniuses in their own right,
And you're coordinating all those too, right?
100%.
You're setting it all up.
No, yeah, no. Like, I'm finding them. I'm like, most of these guys aren't adult publicists.
I wouldn't think so.
You know what I mean? Like, no.
Before they're really established.
Yeah,
too, right?
and that's what I always try to do that. And, and then, like, even, like, a dude, like, this year, like, so, like, Josh the Goon died. And a lot of people don't know who Josh the Goon is because he wasn't famous, but he was Freddie Gibbs' engineer. He did some engineering.
Oh, right. I did see a story about that. I didn't know him until that story.
And this was just a dude kind of like me. He grew up on the west side of LA, just like a dude that, like, grew up in hip hop, and, like, he was in the skating and, like, rap and, like, just rebellion, I guess, in whatever ways, and like the true sense, not the fucking contrived sense. Like, some people just don't fit. And he was like one of those people, and he was a crazy looking motherfucker, and he kind of looked like Uncle Fester, and he was just like, tattoos everywhere. He was just like, he was the dude. Like, I mean, and I've been sad about this because I know that if Josh the Goon he died of a drug overdose, unfortunately, like this summer, and it was like, I was heartbroken. I mean, we weren't really, really close, but we were really, like, we was like the kind of person where it was like, we like understood each other because we were both LA natives. And like, while we didn't hang out we hung out, but we weren't like hanging out once a week or something, But it was like one of those things where like, we understood each other because we were coming from the same place. And that is something that can't be like replaced. And like, there's only so many people you encounter like that,
Right.
And, but like, who's going to write the obituary? The LA Times isn't going to.
Right.
As they shouldn't. That's not the place for the LA Times.
Right.
And I mean, I have a lot of respect for them. I would never diss LA Times. I wrote for them for many years.
Right.
And
so you wrote his obituary?
I wrote an obituary in the LA Weekly, and because and that's because that's where it fits. It's like that's where it makes sense. It's the stuff that you have to know what he meant to this community.
Right.
And it wasn't huge. It was like an underground thing. But he had beats for like. He worked with Muggs. He worked with like Sick Jackin', like and just like a real one. Like just if you were on like the streets of LA, and like I mean like. Any street of LA, because that Josh the Goon would pop up anywhere. He was just like, he was a local legend. And that's why, like, I love the Weekly. And so then, like, it's stuff like that. It's like, it's the cowardice to not even fire anybody. It's the statement they gave when they first took over the paper, being like, LA is not a cultural capital like New York or San Francisco. We are trying to make it different. And then just Brian Kaye slandered. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, no disrespect to any other city, but like, LA's won all the culture for the last decade. It just has. Like, maybe you can say Atlanta won rap music. That is a fair assessment.
It's fair. But debatable. But
all the people that move, part of it is because New York got too expensive and all the cool people moved to LA.
Sure.
But a lot of cool people. But I mean, this is the truth. Like LA got the last decade. So to be that aloof and clueless and insulting, and then Kaye came in and just. Diss the paper, like, I want to make it more edgy and gritty. Goes on Madeline Brand, a big NPR show in Los Angeles.
Right.
And he's like, well, we didn't actually fire anybody. And she's like, yeah. And like, cause it's like, how do you lie like that? It's like, yeah, I guess technically, like, when the paper, like, you have to rehire everyone, but like, people just rehire people. That's how it goes. It's like, yes, technically you maybe didn't fire, but like, it's just one of those, like, Donald Trump lies. And you just saw it, and it's like, oh, great, the Trump administration has bought the LA Weekly.
That's what it sounds like.
It is the Trump administration bought the LA Weekly. And I think that's like one thing I keep on one hammering. It's like it's not only about them being conservative. And I said this, like, the Daily Caller asked me for a comment. They're like Tucker Carlson's website.
Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with
Yeah, I wasn't, to be honest with you, I wasn't really either. And I gave them a comment because I thought it was important to get the idea out that it's not only about them being conservative. Yes, I don't think it's appropriate. I think they're more than welcome to open their own publication. I don't think it's appropriate for a conservative group to buy a liberal publication. I just don't.
Yeah.
Like, just do your own thing. Like, that's fine. These are the rules. You know the rules. That is, you are breaking a certain code of ethics that we all abide by.
Well, they're infiltrating into something that's already an established, kind of brand, I guess, if you will. I mean, brand might not be exactly institution.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I tweeted this yesterday, but it's like, what? Come on, like, what artist wants to like? Yeah, you're gonna do an interview knowing that the clicks off it might enrich like the Donald Trump committee. Yeah, I think that's not gonna happen. Like, how much hubris and ignorance do you have? So they basically do this, and it just turns into like. Okay, I write this like manifesto. It turns out it goes pretty viral. I was like, okay, people are really fucking with this. Then the next day, I'm just so mad, like just to see what happened to like in like my city. Like, I want these artists to get covered. I don't even care. Like, if there was someone that like, I mean, I was always waiting for someone to like just some young kid to just be like, you know what I mean, to be like, like pass the baton.
Yeah.
Like I'm you know what I mean? I just wanted to make sure, but like most of my friends were like, no, the job doesn't pay well. It doesn't pay well enough, and like you do it every week, and it's a fucking headache. And there were definitely like few qualified people for it, but I don't think it was like that many people were like wanting to do like this column for this amount of money. I mean, and shout out to Henry Rollins for doing it, because that guy was definitely not doing it for money.
Right.
He was doing it probably for less than I was making. I mean, I
Sure.
think he wasn't getting paid nothing, but Henry Rollins would have got paid nothing. Like he's still writing his column for free on his website.
Right.
You know, I'm not. I would though, but I just honestly don't have time. That was the thing. Like that column was killing me. Like my freelance schedule was a nightmare. But I would every week. I was like, okay, well Wednesday is a dead day. You can't do anything. You can't do any interviews. You can't take any phone calls.
Just to write.
You just have to write on Wednesday.
How many words would it usually be?
It was 600. So it was like a day of writing.
Right.
You know, like a full day of writing. It was a day and a half of work when you factor in the interview time and like.
Sure.
And but I would just do it every week, and then this happened, and I just got mad. I started doing some research on these men, helped by the OC Weekly kind of pointed them out, and it was just like a laundry list of horrible, like horrible causes and horrible campaign contributions, and then I started attacking. Because I thought it was, at first it was just out of frustration and rage.
Well, sure, yeah.
It just was like, I grew up on like Tupac and Mobb Deep, and like I'm not saying I am those guys, but like Tupac wasn't always too. You know what I mean? Tupac like was like going to ballet class, or prior to was going to ballet classes, right. And Tupac was like doing Shakespeare. So it's like there's just something in you. I think that it's like, and I'm not saying I would never be like, oh, I'm hard. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but there's like an inner rage that's like it doesn't matter who you are, you can access that.
And like I'm so exhausted by people being like, authenticity doesn't matter in the 21st century. There's no such thing as authenticity. It's like hell yeah, there is fucking thing as authenticity.
You could. A lazy kind of comment.
It's lazy. Dame Funk is fucking authentic. Right. Don't can you imagine if you told Dame Funk there's no such thing as authenticity?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there is such a thing as authenticity, and that's like all like. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm the most authentic. There's plenty of authentic people, But like I try like all these like ideas that we thought were trite. Like, and I hate when people are like, I'm exhausted by the language. Like I'm exhausted by people being like, keep it real. Like, you know what I mean? That's such a noxious statement to me.
Right.
But that idea of staying true to yourself and being honest with yourself and who you are and what you stand for and what you believe is timeless. And these men are the opposite of that.
How has it been like leading this push? Because obviously now you're building momentum. It's like it is a campaign of some kind.
Yeah.
So people they're starting to pay attention more and more because you're going hard. You're going hard in the paint.
Totally.
Often.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that there's a lot of people that have helped me out with it. Obviously, like April Wolf was a former film critic for The Weekly, and she's been just amazing at like just going off. I was helped with the funeral. So the organizations were made.
What was the funeral, real quick?
The funeral. So we decided to have a funeral on Friday, last Friday, and it was organized also by me and Katie Bain, who was a former senior music writer there, Rebecca Haithcote, former editor there, Max Bell, former writer there.
Was it in front of the office?
It was in front of the offices. We rented a casket. We stuff it full of LA Weeklies, protested. Right. We got the Stuff Jupiter, Free Stuff Fellowship came.
Really?
Yeah, he came. The mailman was like with us, like from The Weekly. I mean, people do not fuck with these people, and like, good luck getting like running a community newspaper when the community loathes you.
Well, the advertisers have been pulling out too, right?
So that was the next step, right? So we did the funeral, and before that, even we launched an advertiser boycott. The first thing we did was we targeted an event they had called Sip and Sweets, because a big foundation of the LA Weekly's business model had been these events that they would throw. Again,
it's like a food event. Or something?
It was a food event, and it was all again rooted in the goodwill of the community. And most of these people, in fact, all of these people, were giving their money and time for free. Their food and money and time for free. They were spending thousands of dollars on these samples to give to people. LA Weekly would charge $40 or $50 a person. They'd come in, keep the profits, and the hope was that, okay, well, maybe you'll drum up new business. It's a good way of free advertising. People come to the restaurant, but it's also a way for maybe the food critic from LA Weekly will write a review of your restaurant and like take note of it. And I can speak from having done food stuff for The Weekly a few times. I mean, those would go so viral. Like, every time I'd write about food, it would just be like, you're off, know? And I tried to do that. Like, I interviewed, like, Roy Choi about, like, his love of music. I interviewed the Animal Chefs about their love of music.
Cool.
I went to, like, Vernon to profile these two, like, young brothers that, like, are punk rock kids that, like, would play, like noise and punk in, like, a Greek restaurant in Vernon. Stuff like that. Like, try to go to the corners of the city.
Yeah.
And that was the other greatest thing about doing the column, was it forced me to understand the city better. I had no choice.
It's a complicated place to understand because there's a lot of levels.
I'd argue it's the most complicated place to understand because LA is, there's a famous quote Dorothy Parker said. It was LA is like 72 suburbs searching for a city, but now it's like really like 72 cities.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like each part is, and there were blind spots that I had. Like I did not do a good enough job of covering Latino culture, and I will be the first person to tell you that I did my best. But it could be insular at times, and there is a language barrier. I speak a little Spanish, but I don't speak it fluently, and I didn't like. I would always try to look for like Latin rappers to cover, and I did a few, but I didn't do enough. I didn't I didn't cover like I always wanted to do a profile of like salsa music players and like kind of like or like mariachi players, and I just didn't. I didn't get to it, and it was always, but there were always things where it was like I was always thinking like that.
It's a great idea. I mean, there's probably a lot to go off of.
Yeah, I was always trying to kind of like, okay, what are the hidden pockets of the city that I have? There was a column I wanted to write where I never did it, and I was going to go to this place called the Cowboy Palace in Chatsworth. It's a cowboy bar. It's horse country. It's a real cowboy bar in distant suburb LA. Chatsworth. It's technically Los Angeles.
Right.
It's the northeast corner of the valley or northwest corner of the valley, and I wanted to go to this cowboy. I've been before, but I just never wrote the story. I was going to do a story on the Baked Potato, which is like a legendary jazz spot.
Yes, yeah, I know that.
Just
place.
like all these places that I was always in the back of my mind, and that's because LA is so massive. It's like doing New York, and it's like one of the things that I always had a problem with New York coverage of New York writers covering their city. And this is no shots at anyone, but they tend to do like Brooklyn is everything, or like maybe like Lower Manhattan. But it's like I want to read stories like where you're embedded deep in Harlem or like deep in the Bronx. Like I never read a story about like where people like are like spending time in the Bronx.
Right.
I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but
they do. But it's people don't explore maybe enough.
Staten Island, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like there was not, you know what I mean? I never would read that. And with LA, like, I would always, that was my goal, was to try to find that. And I don't know if I did, how good of a job I did. I think I did well, but I know I could have done better.
I think people in LA are more prone to want to explore the city than New Yorkers.
It's like, the secret about it is it's actually easier to explore, I think, than New York is very difficult.
It's more like block by block in New York. And there's a lot of nondescript buildings that have lots of history.
Totally.
But you have to really, and they all kind of look, LA, it's so many different corners.
Yeah, well, I can get across the whole city in 45 minutes in LA. 45 minutes, you probably can't get across, like, a part of Brooklyn sometimes. I'm still, like, mystified. I'm like, wait, what? It's 45 minutes to go from there to there. Aren't there, like, I always would think it was just, like, the neighborhoods were all on top of each other.
It took me an hour to get here.
Really?
And,
where are you coming from?
From Park Slope.
Okay, yeah, it's...
On the train, but, I mean, it's never... Yeah. I mean, it probably would have taken a similar amount of time in a car, too. Just denser.
Yeah.
So another thing, going back to kind of the advertisers though too, I saw that even Amoeba
pulled out. So basically, what happened? We did the Sip and Sweets campaign. Within 2 days, we toppled it. They lost a lot of money, even though they're their new publisher.
And it got canceled.
The whole event got canceled.
Wow.
We did it in 2 days.
Wow.
Then we decided we got Amoeba out, we got KCRW out, we got a bunch of restaurants out.
That's huge.
Yesterday, it was announced that we had Men, which was their biggest weed ad dispensary.
Yeah,
that they will not be renewing their contract in 2018. A lot of music venues, and we still have a lot more to go. But they're gonna all fall out because there's no music coverage. There aren't enough music writers that are qualified.
Right.
Like you can't, and that's the thing. It's like this notion of like the qualifications don't matter. Right. None of this matters. It's like that's why the Trump administration is one of the many reasons why it's so pernicious. But it's like you're hiring a guy that was never a judge or was never really a lawyer, who's just a conservative blogger to be like a judge, like a lifetime appointed seat. That's appalling. And it's like I grew up, and I'm not even like old enough to be like, oh, when I grew up, but like you have to earn things. You have to work for things. That's the only way it works. Like the only way you're qualified. Like I wasn't ready to like have a column at 25 years old. I just wasn't. I think it could have been funny. But, like, was I the right person? Not yet.
Right.
It's like everyone, and it's like, maybe it's for sure a millennial critique, whatever. Like, millennials want everything now. And, like, I get it. Like, that's the world we live in. We live in a thing where you can get the world at your fingertips, like, literally, you know? But...
Well, I think maybe because of that, too, that kind of society might not be breeding the kind of writers that are really... that want to do the hard work, the heavy lifting,
that's what I
for
found.
very little in return.
That's what I found. Is like, people ask me, they're like, well, how did you do it? And they're always like, what's the shortcut? I have no idea how many emails I get. Like, and like, they don't say what's the shortcut, but it's so obvious that it's what's the shortcut. Like, how do you do this? And like, I'm like, I don't pitch people. I never pitched people. You want to know how I did it? Because I wrote a novel for 4 years.
Right.
Like, before I ever wrote a word that anyone ever read. And I filled up 10 journals before a word that anyone ever read outside of my college newspaper column. Right. It's because I started Passional Weiss in 2005 when like no one was fucking blogging, and I wrote for free, and I still will write for free for years before anyone ever paid me for it. You know, and I wrote at Stylist Magazine for free for years before anyone ever paid me for it. And then I got paid.
Right. What was the novel?
It's a long story, but it's about it was about my college experience and like how I pledged a fraternity because I played baseball in college and they were all baseball players, and how I hated pledging a fraternity. I thought it was like the most heinous, awful thing. And then how a guy on my baseball team died in a hazing accident, and how I was heartbroken. We were all like, I mean, it was one of the most tragic. It honestly was the formative experience. I think that probably made me end up writing, because I just started writing a book about it immediately. I mean, I dabbled with writing before, like I definitely did it, and then I immediately started writing a book from the perspective of the driver who'd killed his friend. Wow. Because I knew the driver, and like you know, he would talk to me, and like I kind of just his story was. It wasn't his story. It was my story. It was like a fiction. Sure. It was fiction. It was fiction rooted in, like the fiction that I like is usually rooted in the truth. Right. And so I started doing that, and I worked on it for years. I mean, you have no idea how many drafts, and like I read like not as much as I want to, but like reading to me is everything, and it's like people don't know that. People think like no, not reading articles on that you found on Twitter is not like what you have to do. Like honestly, like it's a delicate balance, I think, because like to be a writer, you have to be aware of what's going on. Of course, you know, you have to know whatever the fucking cat woman is, or cat girl, or whatever the fuck it is. Whatever, cat person. Right. You know, cat person. Like, you have to be familiar with that. Maybe you need a joke or something, but, like, you really don't. Right. You know, like, but I don't know. Like, I always think of writing. I mean, I guess I'm pretentious, but I think of writing, like, even in a dark age. Like, I always think about, like, there were monks for, like, hundreds of years that would just copy scrolls. Right, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, they didn't do it to be famous. They didn't do it because, like, they wanted the recognition. They did it because they thought there was something deeper and important about preserving knowledge and increasing knowledge, and like they knew that maybe like this won't be known for hundreds, and that's what happened. Like, you know, like in the Renaissance, like they found like medieval scrolls like a few hundreds of years later, and they're like, you know, or like Arab scholar, a lot of Arab scholars did that. You know, took the Greek and translated it, and like you know, and really like saved it for the future. And like, I'm not saying I'm doing that because I'm not, but like. That idea is very powerful to me. And I think, and like, maybe like an 18-year-old, and no shots at any young people that are trying to be writers, but there is a certain meditation that maybe is lost, like by how infused the phone is. In definitely, like, you know. I think like there's like a certain like there's no separation between your inner thoughts and your outer thoughts, right? And that's a damning thing. You know, Gary Snyder once wrote something that stuck with me. He said, the best way to be really smart is to be around a bunch of really smart people or spend a lot of time yourself. And I'm butchering the paraphrase, but it was more eloquently stated. Right, but, you know, there's all these writers have meant so much to me. So, like, and me, like, even, like, someone like, I was a big Christopher Hitchens fan. A lot of people don't like Christopher Hitchens because, obviously, he's wrong. He was wrong on the Iraq War. He was wrong on plenty of things in his life. But he was unquestionably brilliant. And he was unquestionably passionate, and he really hated ignorance and stupidity. And that's what and like, he fought so hard. And like, when watching the Trump administration and Hunter Thompson, like, I love the, like, you know, and like, I don't want to be like, I'm like, again, like, not comparing myself to anybody because that's ridiculous. Those are ridiculous comparisons to make, and I'm well aware of that. Right. And honestly, even if they were accurate, I don't want to be compared to anybody else. I think every writer wants to be their own person. You can like authors and writers. I mean, the same way you like Tupac and Hunter S. Thompson are not that different. Totally. Like, yeah, it's that rage against people that are exploiting. Right. You know, that seems like what that's happening right now, like today with this LA Weekly thing. Yeah, it was just sort of like, you know, I didn't want this fight, but this fight found me. Right. And I certainly wasn't about to back down from it. And like, again, like I want to reiterate how many other people, like, I mean, like, it's corny as fuck, but like, yet none of this could have happened if, like, you know, I was like joking yesterday. I was like, look, it's honestly fuck Kevin Durant, but it's like, you the real MVP, because people are calling. Like, this shit wouldn't happen. Like, I'm not like, I can't call 100 people like every day. Like, I've to tweet. God, like, I just want this over so I never have to tweet again. That's like my goal. Right. But do you see what's the end game? Because I have to fucking sell. They are not getting that paper. They are. I am. Like, has the purchase gone through? Like, what's the... Yeah, they own it. Yeah. They own it. But I will, like, and I've been talking to people. I've been trying to kind of like get they have my email. They know how to get me. Like, I told them, like, I my dream scenario, my absolute dream scenario is they sell it to me and a bunch of people. We turn it into a nonprofit. It's supported by the community. We like look for wealthy investors. We do silent auctions. We do things. LA Weekly we know is a charitable entity. It supports good journalism. That's how it goes. That's my dream. B is anybody that knows how to run a fucking newspaper well. Anybody that cares about journalism. Anyone that cares about the community. And like I would definitely I'm not looking to make a dime off this. I'm not looking to be an editor. I don't care. I don't want to be an editor. Right. I don't want to run a fucking newspaper. Right. I love people that do. I'm so happy, and that's why I was so mad. I was like, these people know how to run a newspaper. Like, why would you fire them? What the fuck is
precisely,
wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, that's this weird and surprising part is that you nix a whole staff.
But it's like the Trump administration where they're like, why do you need the State Department? Well, I don't know. Why do we need diplomacy? It's dumb. Right. It's like, no, you fucking need diplomacy, you idiots. Because you need someone in South Korea so they can deal with... You can't just be, it's just not how it goes. There's a reason why diplomacy exists. All these old ideas. Like, all these people that think that these and they're almost always white. But, sometimes you have people that it's just like... I'm Jewish, so I've never really seen myself as a white person per se, but I feel like Jews are like white people with an asterisk. Because it's not like the whites liked the Jews so much, It's like historically speaking, hasn't gone so well for the Jews. So and I feel like, I feel like at heart a connection to that rebellious spirit. I studied a lot of Jewish history, and I'm not religious in the slightest, but I've been to Israel twice, and it's a whole different story, but. And people can have their views on Israel. It's funny. There's a drinking game in Israel where it's it's complicated, and I'm not it's like every time they say it's complicated, drink. But regardless, I admire the Jewish tradition of sedition and rebellion, and if you look at the history of the Jewish people, it's in my interpretation, it's two things. It's writers and it's rebellion. So it's the people that are always being conquered and always being suppressed and they just try to be snuffed out, and they're always like, no, we're gonna fight back. Yeah. And usually they lose. But they keep fighting. And it's the people of the book. They're writers. And these prophets were writers. And there was also a very socialist tradition in Judaism. And that goes back to even if you look at Jesus going into the temple and flipping over the table with the moneylenders and stuff, because it was that is a real tradition of you're not supposed to exploit people, and Israel was founded as a socialist state, and I'm not a socialist, but I think now a lot of us are really thinking okay, look, maybe pure socialism doesn't work, but definitely pure capitalism doesn't work either. So we need to figure this shit out, because we need a second New Deal, because this is a raw deal,
Has anyone from that side reached out to you at all?
No, of course not. And they can't right now, honestly, they might think they can win. Mm-hmm. They're done. They are finished. They don't think they can't win. I know how they make money off those events.
Sure.
And they made money off ads.
Right. Ads are pulling, and the event got canceled. What's left?
Tacolandia pulled out, which was the premier event. 8,000 to 10,000 people would come every year for that. And then you think about it, it's $40 a person, right? Do the math. That's a lot of fucking money. Yeah. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's gone. Bill Esparza, much respect to him for pulling out, because we all. You don't have to agree. I mean, there's people that don't agree. People are well, keep this. And I also want to just say one more thing. I think some people are I could see why someone would be well, why isn't any LA Weekly better than no LA Weekly? And that is the wrong way to think. And that's part of the reason why we're in this situation right now culturally.
Right.
Sometimes you have to be no, it is not. And you are not going to do this, because if this is the zombie LA Weekly. It's walking around staggering with its brains out. It's
the one that just got published. I was reading about that one too, or reading that. That seemed like they were recycling old pieces,
old blog posts that somebody had written a month before. That's not the LA Weekly. The LA Weekly was what we had built, and a lot of other people had built before me.
Right.
And that is dead. And it was dead the moment they fired everyone. It was dead the moment that they took over. It was dead the moment they insulted the city of LA. It was dead the moment we staged that funeral. When we staged that funeral, we knew it was dead. That's why there was a casket there.
Sure.
This is dead. These are White Walkers, not to get all Game of Thrones, but these are the White Walkers. And, they might look like the person, but, I'm not, I don't know. For me, if I had a family member, I wouldn't want to watch them in a coma for 5 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? I would want them to be, just preserve your legacy and have some self-respect and dignity. And just, you know what I mean? End this. The goal, of course, is to get them to sell, and even if we have to destroy the paper, then fine. Hopefully, they will sell us the brand. Hopefully they will sell. And I'm not. When I say us, I'm like, don't sell it to me. I don't care. So just sell it to someone that cares. Sell it to someone that will do a good job with it. I would rather not be a part of any sale. I don't want to be an exec. I want to write a book.
Right.
Like,
you just published one earlier this year too, right?
What?
Was this the Biggie one?
Oh, that was a few years ago. That was, I think, 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wrote a book like 3 years ago. And I've been working on a book. I was just working on one, and then this happened. And I don't want to fucking do this. I want to write a book. I just, care. I really do care. And, I try really hard not to be full of shit.
Right. You can't roll over at the same time. I mean, I get it, man. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, too, because I find it fascinating. The story in itself of what's going on with the writers and the staff. And there's obviously... It's a tense time. There's tension, both on that corporate level, but in that writer community in LA too. It's kind of a tumultuous kind of period.
Yeah, LA is shut down. It's real, and we're gonna have to figure it out because there's no alternative. We can't not have news in LA. We can't developers are gonna just run rampant. Just exploit everything. It's interesting because I really have in the last few years, I guess it's just a factor of getting older, but I've just been very much invested in I went to a planning board meeting because they're building this horrible monstrosity that's about to ruin my neighborhood, and I just went to these guys that were just to approve the development, and I excoriated them for 10 minutes, and I was just shame on you. Just shame on you for doing this. And I'm not a NIMBY. I'm not but it's nobody needs a fucking a 10-story mixed-use building where it's all chain stores in the middle of Los Feliz, where there's going to be the employees can't park there, of course.
Right.
It's and they're going to be parking all in the neighborhood, and no one will ever have a parking spot, and it's going to be another disaster and you're paying people $9 an hour, and the corporation's making $1 billion. And it's just it's only rich people that can afford these places because it's not affordable housing.
Right.
I'd rather it be affordable housing. It's people I'm okay, well, at least you're helping people. At least you're giving people a chance to live in a decent place, not just rich people that can pay $3,000 a month for a one bedroom, so they can live above a Crate and Barrel. Fuck that.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm just done, and I hope that, and I know that other people are, and we all feel powerless. And we are not powerless, and we have to remember that. And we have to remember that Donald Trump won, but he will lose this war. That there's that the old cliche about the arc of the universe bends towards justice. That is true. Things have got better. There is but they get worse. It's it's history doesn't necessarily always go forward. It goes in fits and starts. It goes backwards sometimes. And I think it's imperative for all of us not to let it go backwards and letting the news turn into propaganda. Another thing I want to go back to is not only is this a zombie paper, at any point it could be actively dangerous paper. All you need is one article to be used as propaganda for the other side. We saw that in the last election.
It's inching very quickly towards that right now.
Yeah, it's one article. It is one article that just slips into the radar. No one notices it. Boom! It goes viral, and you're changing people's minds, and it's hard to change people's minds back. Once people make a decision, that it's often kind of calcified.
Well, if you have that reporting on the fire, which was just in the LA Weekly, I saw your comments on that too.
That was the cover story, by the way. That was the cover story. That was the end of the cover story written by the interim editor. That's disgraceful.
Right.
And I don't even want to get into that's just disgraceful. That is, come on.
Right.
Come on.
It's just bad writing too, and it's dangerous because it takes a couple of those, and then you start seeing the kind of real dark side start to rise. When you got interim people coming and going.
Yeah, totally. And it's I'm sure you saw the film critic they used to get the Star Wars review. It's rape fiction, basically, more or less. Fuck if you're fired.
Wow.
Fuck if you're fired was the name of his book. This is the film critic.
Right.
He's not a full time guy, but
right, of course,
they would never hire a full time. But that's the first person you hire, and it's just.
Oh,
I don't know. I know we got to run, but I just want to kind of I just kind of want, I guess, with a. I mean, if you have any more questions, of course, I can do it. But for a closing statement, I just want to go back to that point of this is not me. This is a feeling that all of us have felt. This is a feeling. This is something that all of us are doing. And there's a lot of people out there whose names I can't even mention right now, but they've been tweeting at me, and then just other journalists that are writing me thanks for doing this. That honestly means so much, and. We are not going to stop, and we are not going to lose. And I'm just I'm maybe I could be passionate. It's a pretty thin line between that and crazy, but I'm not gonna let them win. They don't know. I sent in the first email to Brian Kaye. I said, "Don't make this Stalingrad. I was like, this is fucking Russia in the wintertime, motherfucker. You
Yeah,
are not
do it, man.
You are not fucking winning this battle. I'm
Right.
going to pull them down one sponsor at a time. If
Well,
we have to go
it's
one,
going there. It seems like it's starting
going.
to turn.
But it's like if any of them are holdouts, you get 50 to 100 phone calls a day. Every day, they're not going to be able to do business. They will cancel their ads.
Right.
There is not going to be an LA Weekly until they sell it to us, and that is the truth. And I don't want to say us. I don't mean I don't mean me. I mean hopefully the community.
Yeah, I
But
understand
just
that.
a newspaper. I want it just to be good again. You know.
Well,
I don't-
you deserve the people should do that. I mean, I watched The Voice basically fizzle
and
out.
no one did anything. And
It was heart-wrenching, you
Yeah,
know, and
because-
all the legacy of the writers there, Robert Christel, Rob
Yeah.
Harvilla, and so on and so forth, many great people,
Yeah.
and it just kind of just died on the vine.
You just really have to, and I think that's the message of it. And I hope that if anything comes from this, say the worst case scenario is that there is no LA Weekly ever again. It just, they don't sell it,
Right.
they just shut it down. That's the worst case scenario. That's a horrible scenario. I will
Right.
be the first one to admit it. I still say it's better than them running their zombie LA Weekly. That could be dangerous.
Right.
2, this is a line in the sand. Symbols are important. That's how we process things as human beings. We need symbols. We need better symbols. We need to be able to be like, nope. You want to do this? You want to come in and you think you're going to buy the paper and change it? You're going to do like your Republican fake news bullshit? Not happening here, motherfucker.
Right.
You're losing every fucking dime you invested.
Right.
So you can shut it down, but you can't win. And like, you know what? They're gonna think twice the next time anyone tries to do this bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and I hope that other people get inspired. I just honestly, if other people get inspired to do shit like this, then it will be I mean, and I think they already have. Hopefully, it's at least what they've told me. So that's a victory. And I'm gonna keep fighting, and I hope everyone who listens to this knows that like how appreciative me and everybody else invested in this is of their help, and like that they can't win. Like, you know, fuck Seminole Media as a staff record label as a motherfucking crew.
We'll end it on there, man. Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it, dude.
Appreciate it.
Man, that was exhilarating. Shout out to my man Jeff Weiss for doing the podcast. Passion of the Weiss. Check that blog. It's been active for years. There's a lot of great writers and contributors, so peep that out. Follow him on Twitter and see what I'm talking about as we really like watch this all unfold. And in fact, it's pretty amazing that the day that we recorded this is the day that he had a big story in the Washington Post go up on the 25th anniversary of The Chronic, Dr. Dre's The Chronic, which he wrote. So it's kind of funny, you know, as a working writer, he's balancing these two things. So I would advise reading that. It's pretty fascinating in its own right. And if this is your first time listening, go back, check out some of the other episodes that we've done. There's some really, really great conversations with a range of people in music and the industry. And, my name is Peter Agostin. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe and spread the word if you can. If you're on SoundCloud, repost it on your SoundCloud page. That is a great way to get it out there so that folks that have never heard it before might stumble across something that they like. Every episode is edited and engineered by CJ Stewart. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season, or if you're in the midst of it right now, and safe travels. And hopefully I'll get some really great episodes coming out right before the new year and well into the new year. Remember, if you want to underwrite this podcast or advertise in any kind of magnitude, please reach out to me. You can hit me up in any number of ways on Twitter @HouselessPod, through peter@agostinagency.com, or the Gmail account that's affiliated with our SoundCloud page. Hit me up and let's talk, and we'll make something work. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys very soon. Peace, y'all.